Well, guys, how do you like it on a relatively slow news day? We have the governor of New York resigning due to these alleged sexual harassment allegation charges. He 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 sounded so sad when he said this thing that he said. He gave the nod to Kathy Holcomb, who is going to be our new governor. She's the lieutenant governor. She's the first um, woman governor of New York ever. So that's a big milestone. But he sounded really sad. He sounded like a fallen hero that just resigned in disgrace. He sounded like he, he was ashamed for his actions and he was sorry for his actions. But unfortunately, this really tampers with Andrew Cuomo's legacy, I feel, because his legacy coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic last year was that he was a good governor, that he was leading the people. People were giving him praise, showering him with praise, showering him with admiration. But oh, what a difference a year makes. After this, after they were showering with praise, they were showering with admiration, comes out with these allegations. And at first, he tried to deny it. He tried to say that it wasn't true, and he tried to claim that he was being canceled by the establishment, that he was being me too, and he was being harassed and witch hunted. But obviously, this to me is an admission of guilt. I mean, you came out and you said in all words that you didn't. But what I do commend, what I do applaud, is the governor. Excuse me, the Democrats, both nationwide and in New York City and state, condemning Andrew Cuomo, and that's the difference between um, the political left reaction to Andrew Cuomo's allegations and those on the right reaction to Donald Trump's allegations. Why did I bring Trump into the mix? Yeah, Lisa, I was gonna get to that. Hey, Lisa, how you doing? Um, why did I bring Trump into the mix? Because when allegations like this came out about Trump last year, I mean, a few years ago, way back, even when he first started running, um, Republicans defended Donald Trump. They sided with Donald Trump. Here, the Democrats did the right thing and they called out Donald Trump. It takes more guts on the part of mature men and women to call out their own side than to call out the other side. Anybody could call out the other side and point fingers at the other side. What it takes is to look at your own side and see the error in your own self and your own political side. This is not sports. This is not rooting for teams. This is not contestants on American Idol. This is real life. So you might think, oh, well, I'm rooting for Trump, so of course I'm going to say that everything Trump does is right and everything Cuomo does is wrong. No, but if Trump did wrong, call out Trump for it. If Cuomo did wrong, call out Cuomo for it. So, like Lisa is saying, at least Cuomo and Cuomo's side, Cuomo's the Democratic side, had the guts and had the integrity to call out their own side, their own people. Yeah, the Democrats called out Cuomo, and they put the pressure on Cuomo to resign. The Republicans did not put the pressure on Donald Trump to resign. As a matter of fact, if he ran today, they would still be voting for Trump. They would still um, be rooting for him and be saying that the Democrats were conspiring against him. Could you imagine if the Democrats had done that with Cuomo? They had said that the Republicans were conspiring against Cuomo. Everybody would have lost respect for them, but they didn't do that. They went out there and condemned condemned Cuomo, and they put the pressure on Andrew Cuomo, to resign as governor of New York because of these allegations. And that's what you have to do, guys. You have to pressure the politicians in Washington and the politicians in Albany to do the right thing. If you want men and women with integrity in the political arena, because the things that Andrew Cuomo was accused of is so easily to happen to especially men in power, in powerful positions, to abuse their power and to manipulate other people sexually. And I say people because although Andrew Cuomo's victims were all women, there are men that get abused by this as well, with people in positions of power, specifically other men. And you have to call these people out. You know what I mean? Even if it hurts you politically, because Andrew Cuomo was a popular governor. And had this not happened, I think that the Democrats would have tried to nominate possibly Andrew Cuomo for president of the United States to run in 2024 if Trump had won. Or maybe if Biden or Kamala decides not to run, they would have nominated Cuomo maybe, and or maybe if not 2024, maybe 2028, his name would have been in the running. But because of this, his legacy and the legacy of his family, a political family, the most prominent Italian American political family in New York State. His father was a former governor. His brother is on CNN. They're very connected to the political establishment on the Democratic side, and for the Democrats to call for him to resign and call for him to step down is the right move for the party, because they're showing that their rhetoric of speaking out for women's rights and speaking out um, against sexual harassment in the workplace is not just talk. They're walking the walk as well as talking the talk, guys. And you gotta give it up for that, for them for that. Now, what Lisa brought up, um, yes, it's true that Andrew Cuomo was packing the nursing homes during the COVID-19 pandemic last year. Um, People were getting the COVID-19 pandemic, and he was shoving them into nursing homes, and basically putting the already nursing home residents that already lived there at risk. In fact, my grandmother was one of them, unfortunately, that contracted COVID in the nursing home facility that she was in last year because of his policies. But we didn't know that publicly. When he was getting on TV every single day in the beginning of the pandemic, he was gathering for himself political clout, I believe, to try to run against Trump, either um, and to run against Trump or position himself juxtaposed to Trump, opposite Trump, in some kind of political campaign. And a lot of Democrats that didn't like Trump, they were getting behind Andrew Cuomo. For a while there, for months before we found out about the nursing home situation or the sexual harassment, Cuomo was the guy. If you would have asked any Democrat, um, who's the best politician out of all the mayors, all the governors, and Trump included, and even globally, like even you could throw like Boris Johnson in there or Emmanuel Macron, even globally, um, Xi Jinping, Shinzo Abe, all these guys globally, what politician was really handling COVID-19 the best? People would have said Andrew Cuomo. he had a lot of support. And then just like that, like a house of cards or like a domino effect, boom, one little domino and all the other dominoes started to fall down for him. First, the nursing home controversy, and then this. And also the hypocrisy, too. There was one incident where we were in heavy COVID. It was like March or April of last year, where he and his brother were spotted out unmasked in a gathering that was more than 100 people. So that came out, and that ruined him. But his side, the Democratic side, they didn't they didn't come out and say, well, yes, we defend Andrew Cuomo for his hypocrisy. We defend him for his sexual immorality, and we defend him for the nursing home situation. They didn't say that. But when the stuff came out about Trump in 2016 and kept coming out about him and how he mishandled COVID, the Republicans defended him. And see, that's the difference, I believe, guys, between the two parties. One stands for ethics and morality, at least in this situation, this current crop of Democrats. I'm not saying that all Democrats stand for ethics and morality. Obviously, there's corruption on both sides of the aisle. Um, as George Washington, yeah, Lisa is absolutely right. The brother caught COVID last year, and then they caught him not quarantining. But the point is, they caught him out there, and the brother. What I don't like, okay, yes, that's your brother, right? But you have a job as a journalist to report the news unbiasedly. Just because he's your brother and you feel like if he ever does become the first Italian American president, right, and makes history in that regard, that you will get some of the props. You defend him. Wow, Lisa says it's ironic that his brother is taking off. Well, the brother's taking off, Lisa, because he doesn't want to. He's ashamed. When I was in high school, I happened to leave this girl at the prom, and the next day, I didn't come to school after that. Well, that's kind of like what Chris Cuomo is doing. He he's not coming to show up. He's not showing his face publicly because he's ashamed of what his brother has done. Because he defended his brother. He always defends his brother, and I feel like he doesn't really report the news unbiasedly. He always he always sticks up for his bigger bro because they're a political dynasty in New York. I remember when his father was governor. I remember when the father was governor, and they, of course, they wanted Andrew to be the president of the United States. At least that's what I believe. They wanted to position Andrew in such a way like he could use the crisis of COVID and the way he handled it. Yeah, he was governor when we were both born. At least he was the first Italian American governor of New York. Of New York, he broke that ethnic barrier in New York for Italian Americans. Um, so th- there's never been an Italian American president of the United States, so they were probably positioning Andrew Cuomo to be that in that sense. Um, but now that has gone all down the drain because of this. And of course, having his brother in the media is was good for him too because he could do interviews with the brother and the brother would ask him light questions and really wouldn't beat around the bush with him. You know what I mean? They were kind of like the Kennedys in a way. You know what I mean? Because if Andrew would have got in, Chris would have had some political clout too, some freedom, free access to the president of the United States or to um, that, and they were positioning him for that, especially how he became the public face for the right reaction to COVID at first. You know what I mean? Like he was the only governor, like I said, him and Ron DeSantis, but Ron DeSantis um handled the COVID situation worse than Cuomo. So people that wanted to handle it correctly and do the right thing in quarantine at first, they were all behind Cuomo, and that was giving him his leeway into because what these politicians do, these local politicians like governors and mayors and stuff, they use the political crisis and how they handle things in these little local political crises like Giuliani with 9/11 or um, Chris Christie with Hurricane Sandy. And when they go on a national stage, they'll say, "Well, I can handle crisis situations because look how I handled 9/11 in Giuliani's case, or and uh, Hurricane Sandy," and they keep bringing it up. Giuliani to this day will continue to bring up how he was mayor of New York the day 9/11 happened. So I think that's what they were trying to do with Cuomo. They were trying to position him to the point where they could make him a candidate somewhere in the future for the presidency. But that's all been ruined now, thanks to this. Because I think with the nursing home situation, Lisa, I think the Democrat unbelievable if it came down to say Ron DeSantis and Cuomo, the Democrats would have tried to defend Cuomo on his actions with regards to the nursing home thing, but this they can't defend this. You know what I mean? This is indefensible. Um, because how would they look if they defended this? They would look exactly like the Republicans when they defended Trump's actions. And the Democratic side been really looking for a family dynasty. They haven't really had one since the Kennedys, and they've been really looking for that kind of family dynasty that the Republicans have had because Republicans have had um, multiple family dynasties. Um, I think they'll probably bring them up on charges, and I hope they do. Because think about it, guys. We talk a lot about on this channel about we talked in the Aaliyah video in the archives about R. Kelly. We talked before about how Bill Cosby and stuff. But if they don't do anything to Andrew Cuomo and they do stuff to this guy, it's gonna those guys. It's gonna look like it's just racist. Like white men like Andrew Cuomo could get away with it, but black men like Bill Cosby and R. Kelly cannot. So they almost have to do something to Andrew Cuomo in a legal sense, not just him stepping down, but him also being prosecuted legally. They almost have to do that if they want to save face in within the Democratic voters, the Democratic black voter base. You know what I mean? Because they're gonna say, well, like they did with Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. Well, okay, you're letting these white guys off the hook, but you're only the Me Too movement is only targeting black celebrities. You know what I mean? So they almost have to they almost have to do that in a way. And they should do it. It should be done for everybody, regardless, irrespective of race. Sexual harassment and sexual violence against women, uh, is never the answer. Now you say, well, it's not sexual violence because he didn't rape them. but he committed inappropriate acts. Old fashioned. I don't know. See that? See, Lisa. Okay, yeah. What I think about about his excuse of being old fashioned with how he interacts with women. Um, Listen, guys. If you think that is appropriate in a workplace to make sexual jokes with women because you created claim quote unquote old fashioned, you need to get another job because we are there as co-workers. We are there to respect each other as co-workers, and that breach of co-workerness is not to be violated. And if it is, you need to be fired or you need to step down. Yeah, he did say that, Lisa. You're right, he did. And that is a bullshit excuse. That's a complete bullshit excuse. I feel. Old fashioned, listen, old fashioned guys, you know, they were brought up with respect. Respect of women. Respect a woman like she's your mother, your sister, your daughter, or your wife. Making inappropriate jokes or hugging women inappropriately, no. I don't believe in that. I feel like coworkers of any gender, right? They shouldn't even touch because at this stage in the game, you never really know when someone is acting inappropriately. In fact, I said to Lisa the other day that people always made fun of Vice President Mike Pence because he never wanted to be alone with women because of his religious beliefs. But he was absolutely correct. I feel that, you know, because of the way things are today, you have to really be careful, of how certain women will respond to certain things. Now, certain other women, you know, they like that. Certain other people, even men, they like, sexual jokes or they like to be hugged and they like to be not touched, but like, physical contact. Some people are doesn't really bother them, but other people do. And people should have discernment, I believe, to be able to read those signals of who's comfortable with it and who ain't. You know what I mean? Simply saying that you're old fashioned. So you mean to say back in the 60s and 70s, old fashioned guys just went up to their secretaries and started hugging them or started saying inappropriate things to them, sexual jokes? No, I don't. I don't. I don't think that was the norm. You know, he's doing it because he's a man. He's a man in a position of power. He's from a political dynasty in his family, where his father was the governor and his brother works on ABC, and he felt like he could get away with it. Being old fashioned, okay, how is that any different than what Trump said? Trump said it was locker room talk, what he said. And that's the same that's the exact same thing that Cuomo said. Come on, guys. You gotta be consistent. You know what I mean? When you call out these people for their Me Too allegations, and this goes for Democrats as well as Republicans, people that supported Trump and people that supported Andrew Cuomo, you have to be consistent. If you're gonna call out somebody, call out everybody. If you're gonna call out nobody, then call out nobody. If sexual harassment in the workplace doesn't bother you, then fine. It doesn't bother you. You feel like it's not a big issue, unless it's something really a violation like rape or something. You know what I mean? But if it bothers you, then you have to call out everybody. You can't excuse some because they belong to the same ethnicity as you or the same political persuasion as you, and then don't call out others. You know what I mean? Like, if we're really gonna tackle this issue of sexual harassment and sexual violence against women, then we have to target it all. Right, exactly, Lisa. That's my point. That's why they have to be consistent. And I have to give it up for the Democrats for being consistent. They have to be consistent. You have to call out everybody. You can't just call out some people and not call out others. And I think that Cuomo believed that he would get away with it because we're in New York, we're in a majority Democratic state, and he believed that, oh well, Democrats are never going to come against me like they came against Trump, and they'll defend me, And when they didn't have his back, when they didn't defend him, he had no choice but to resign. That's why I say it's a disgrace because because I believe honestly, Lisa, that he thought that the party would go to bat for him, even though the newer crop of Democrats is mostly women, mostly minority groups, and mostly members of the LGBT community. They're not the old school Democrats like when his dad was in office or before that that would defend a Democrat just to defend a person just because they got a D next to their name. you know, you know what I mean? Like especially in New York, like we nominated AOC, one of the most out of the box candidates in political history. I mean, 28 years old, a bartender with little to no political experience, a Hispanic woman, really progressive, coming out there, you know, fist swinging against not only Trump, but against the Democratic establishment, people like Cuomo and people like Nancy Pelosi, the newer progressives, the newer members of the squad, the new class that came in 2018, they're not going to stand for those political shenanigans. They're calling on anybody and everybody that they feel is guilty of political corruption, whether they got a D next to their name, an I next to their name, or an R next to their name. It doesn't really matter. They're calling out people based on principle and not politics. Well, I'm glad Kathy Hochul, yeah, I mentioned her in the beginning, Lisa. Um, I didn't really know much about her, so I guess I'll give her a chance. Yeah, being the first female governor, I feel like that's a milestone, but I don't know. I guess I got to be a little bit honest. I feel like her tenure is going to be a little bit tainted, Lisa, because yes, she achieved that milestone, but she didn't win it. You know what I mean? Like it was like when uh, Elliot Spitzer stepped down, and then we had our first African American governor, and he was a blind man as well. And it was just almost like he didn't really feel like the real governor. You know what I mean? Because he didn't win it. You know what I mean? The people didn't choose him. They chose Andrew Cuomo, and now Andrew got to step down. The thing is, we don't know much about her. All we know really is that she's a female governor. And I know a lot of people that are blind feminists are going to just love it because she's a female governor. Again, that's the wrong approach to have, guys. You gotta evaluate her on based on merit. Based on what she's gonna do for the people. What how she gonna take the ball now that we got this Delta strain out here, and with the Delta variant, and how's she gonna take the ball and how's she gonna run with it? And that's the thing too. I think going back to Andrew Cuomo, he mentioned the Delta variant in his speech. I believe I believe he thought they can't fire me or they can't force me to step down in the middle of the Delta variant crisis. They can't, you know, New York ain't gonna do that. But he was mistaken. We're really mistaken about um, the political climate in New York right now. New York is turning into something completely different. We're not putting up with the old school BS that we put up with in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We're calling our politicians to task now. So as far as Kathy Hochul, I don't know about Kathy. You know what I mean? I'll have to see. I'll have to evaluate the job that she's doing. But as far as being the first female governor, of course, that's a milestone. There aren't that many female governors out there in a lot of the states. And of course, that's a huge thing. But just that alone is not going to be good enough. You know what I mean? Right. They'll make you step down during a natural disaster. Just that alone, just being a female governor, Lisa, is not going to, at least for me, and I think for most um, New Yorkers, that's not, those kind of symbolic victories, that was, back in the 2010s, like when Obama was president, or when um, David Williams, I believe his name was, that was became the governor after Elias Spitzer stepped down. David Patterson. David Patterson. Um, that was the norm back then. That was the kind of thing we looked for, like a first black governor, a first black um, mayor, David Dinkins or David Patterson. I mean, Barack Obama. But now we've achieved those milestones. Now we're really looking for somebody to really do something for us, take care of the situation, handle the situation, the best man and woman for the job. So if Kathy Hochul is the best uh, woman for the job and she feels like she's up to the task, by all means, let her take the ball and run with it. Just because she wasn't elected doesn't mean that she can't be put on the spot to be one of the best that ever did it. She could still knock it out the park and be like Kobe Bryant in Game Seven. You know what I mean? But just being like a female governor to me, that's those kind of symbolic victories. While big in history, is not going to really do much for us on the ground, preventing preventing something like what happened with COVID last year from happening again. Because I believe, to me, and me and Lisa talked about this too, I think every politician, every state, every country, every place around the world was really caught off guard with COVID. They they didn't know what to do. None of them ever studied history. None of them ever knew about the Spanish flu or studied the reactions to that, and they all was caught off guard, and all of them failed. All of them politicians, I believe, around the world all failed because they didn't know what to do. I think he had a couple more years. Well, no, because he was reelected in 2018, Lisa. So um, he was about to be done anyway, like with Bill de Blasio. Yeah, he was about to be done anyway. So it wouldn't have mattered, but it does matter in the sense that uh, the people called him to task. His people called him to task, and they told him, "Listen, you're not going to be getting away with this kind of stuff." Because Like, this is a perfect example from back in history, back in recent history. If what happened with Bill Clinton happened today in modern times, 2021, like it did in 1998, Democrats, the Democrats of today would have been calling for Bill Clinton to step down, like they did with Andrew Cuomo. That kind of shit of using their positions of power to abuse women is not gonna happen in the 21st century like it happened in years past. That's just not gonna cut it now. We're living in a different time. And if that's what Andrew Cuomo meant by I'm old fashioned, that I believe that I can use my political position and my position of power to abuse my position of power to to do that, then I mean, of course not, Andrew Cuomo. Like, are you serious? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? You're not gonna get. You gotta. We gotta make an example out of these people. You know what I mean? We gotta let them know. Listen, you ain't doing the right thing. You gotta get out of there. You know, time's up for corruption in Albany. Right, exactly, Lisa. The '90s was a carefree era. It wouldn't have been able to. It wouldn't have been able to happen before, and it wouldn't be able to happen before the '90s, and it wouldn't have been able to happen now, especially now. Forget it. It's a different party. It's a different world out there. But that's a good thing, guys. That women are feeling confident enough that they're able to step out there and finally admit that they've been victims of sexual harassment. Because for the longest, back in the day, what guys like Cuomo would do is they would threaten some of these women that they worked with. Like, oh, if you tell on me, I'll have you fired. Or, who's going to really believe you over me? Of course, I'm a respected politician in the biggest state in the United States, and nobody will believe some little um, no name person that works in the office with him over him. Of course, they would believe him. So he would threat. They would use bullying and intimidation tactics to threaten these women into silence, and sometimes they would pay them off. That's exactly what Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton did back in the '90s, when Bill Clinton was um, not only when he was president, but even before he was president, with when he was the governor of Arkansas. They paid women off. They intimidated women politically and socially to stay quiet about what Bill was doing. Not only Bill, but Hillary was an accessory to it as well. And a lot of these politicians was used to doing that. You know, oh, just tell them that you'll give them a certain amount of money to shut up, about what happened. And people look the other way if they like the candidate. You know what I mean? Or they like the person, they would look the other way. The voters would too. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, men and women were used to being sexually harassed in the office workplace, and men were used to getting their way with women that were being abused in the office workplace. And by abuse, I don't just mean like, okay, they physically touched them or they physically did something to them. Even joking inappropriately with a woman in a workplace, um, when she doesn't want it, or you're passing her notes or flirting with her inappropriately when she doesn't want it, is unacceptable. You know what I mean? People think, oh, well, it's supposed to be like big things, like, oh, he came onto her, he touched her, he showed his penis or whatever. No, it doesn't have to be that. Even the slightest thing, keep it at keep it at a workplace appropriate level when you're speaking to your coworker of the opposite sex or the same sex if you're known to be gay. You know what I mean? Keep it at a workplace appropriate level to the point where you are just talking about just work. How hard is that? I talk about work, I talk a little bit about my family life or whatever, but I don't cross a line to where I'm saying stuff that's inappropriate or doing stuff that's inappropriate. That's not hard, guys. You know what I mean? Like these politicians and these people in power, they act like it's something big to just expecting to act like decent human beings with respect for their fellow coworkers. Anyway, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, some of your, a lot of your remarks, as usual, very informative stuff I completely forgot about with um, Andrew Cuomo and his brother. Right. When it comes to hands, Lisa, you're absolutely right. Keeping yourself, but what I'm saying is, it's not just hands. If I go up to somebody that is a coworker at a job, and I say to that person, to that woman, let's say, if I mention that she has nice breast or she has a nice butt or whatever, if I say something completely inappropriate like that, I should be fired. I should be removed from my job because that is not something that you say to a coworker. You have respect for that coworker as a coworker. Now, the question becomes, if you are a single person and you um you feel like you kind of interested in that other person, that coworker that is also a single person, how do you approach them on the job without somebody from human resources claiming that you went at them inappropriately? What I think is that if you think that she's receptive to whatever your flirting incidents, then you can go for it, but on your own time. Don't use the workplace as a pickup bar, or as a dating app. It's not the place for that kind of behavior, that kind of talk, or that kind of actions. Hands, obviously, Lisa, you're absolutely right. Hands should be out of the question. But what I'm saying is it's more than that. You know what I'm saying? It's more than just hands. There's inappropriate jokes, there's inappropriate remarks, stuff like that. Inappropriate compliments that go on in work that women take offense to. You know, Mhm. Right, exactly, exactly. Lisa said, just keep the hands to themselves and don't say disrespectful things. But a lot of guys act like it's too much to do that. Like they'd be like, oh, and they get really indignant about it, and they'd be like, "Oh, I can't believe she's asking me to, you know, not be myself. Look at her. She's on her power trip, trying to censor me to tell me what I can and can't say. It wasn't like this back in the day. Well, of course it wasn't. Because everyone is needs to be antisocial. Of course it wasn't, though, because back in the day, women didn't really work in the workplace. Women were most okay. Yeah, there were secretaries and stuff, but the workplace, whether it was a corporate job or a white collar job or a blue collar job or whatever, was exclusively the domain mostly of men. Besides jobs like secretaries, nurses, and teachers were all just men. But now that we have a lot more women in the workplace, we have to be in a more respectful mode. And, men have to call other men to task as well, you know, and women who stand to benefit from certain men in power sometimes make excuses for the men in their lives that are engaged in this kind of behavior. Me, I always try to be on my best behavior when it comes to comments towards women because I just didn't want to get slapped. You know what I mean? So that was my thing. You know? Anyway, peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love y'all.